Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I was comfortably seating on the bus, enjoying a game on my phone. Being considerate, I always keep my phone on silent so I wasn't disturbing anyone. The bus ride was an hour long, which gave me a great opportunity to have some gaming fun. Suddenly, a Karen I didn't know comes up to me, demanding that I give her my phone. It turns out she believed it was her responsibility to teach me a lesson about using phones on public transport. She thought taking my phone was a noble mission. She genuinely thought she was doing me a favor by taking away my source of entertainment. She believed losing my phone would be beneficial for me in the long run. I calmly tried to reason with her, expressing my confusion and explaining that I wasn't causing any harm. However, it becomes clear that she strongly believes in her righteous mission. She genuinely thinks that taking my phone is her way of imparting wisdom and correcting my behavior. And after a couple minutes of arguing she then yells at the bus driver that I stole her phone. The bus driver gets out of his seat and he was believing her, so I told her to take my phone, turn it off, and give it to the woman to try to unlock it. She does a random password. It doesn't work, she does a random password again. It doesn't work, she does a random password again and again and again until the phone locks. I tried telling the bus driver that since she doesn't even know the password to her phone, then it is hers, the bus driver, I was still a bit skeptical. So when the phone unlocked again, I put in my password and got it in one try. And somehow she doesn't back down and says, so what if I tried to take the phone? It is still very disrespectful to use your phone in public. I was just trying to teach this boy a lesson. I spent 40 minutes waiting for the bus because Canadian transit is a little piece of crap, and when I sit down I'm trying to relax by playing some games, this Karen tries to steal my phone. This is the third year our water conservation co-op has been working with this Karen. We have an incredible track record, having saved 300 million gallons of water in 30 super pleased customers, all who have retained us to do more projects. So the last 2 weeks this Karen lost her mind. We're landscaping her backyard. It's a McMansion 1-2-acre for backyard and doing irrigation. She started coming up with random new requirements, expected me to do them in less than 12 hours. For example, we put in 3,000 sesk of sod and needed to rework her sprinkler system. But we were losing pressure and had to be careful. So we set up temporary sprinklers. Well, she decided she wanted the other sod in another place even further away where it would be impossible to get more pressure. i.e., 15-foot hill, told her this. She wanted us to add a whole new line during the night in 12 hours. Then she said we weren't doing what we promised. Like for some reason she thinks there shouldn't be weeds in her yard. And we are responsible for that. Concrete, for example, gets weeds in it. She also accused of not landscaping the backyard, which we were in the process of doing. On Friday, we had $3,000 worth of plants for said landscaping. She came out of her house screaming and yelling, saying, I'm a paying customer, at the top of her lungs, and said she wasn't going to pay for the plants. We told her we would not work on her yard anymore. She lost it. I started to have a panic attack, was in tears and hyperventilating, and tried to get things under control and de-escalate it. She lunged at me, so my business partner had to step in between to prevent her attacking me. Later, when my partner tried to check on me, she chased him down. After this whole thing, she put a $100 in envelope in her mailbox, now tells my business partner she won't pay us another dime. We installed a $15K fire pit, the sod, $1,000 worth of planters and sprinkler turn-on, rework, and repairs. She is a wealthy white woman who brags about how her husband makes millions of dollars a month, and how he is a shark among minnows. Also, she invited another client over to her house, showed them the unlandscaped backyard, and said that's what we did. We lost a tank contract from her line. Some people's kids, eh? Update. The co-op's lawyer referred us to the litigation attorney. So she's preparing a certified demand and a cease and desist. She also told us to go and file a police report. Wednesday, we had talked with police. Police tried to call her 3 times, and then we went over with the police and they weren't there. So we couldn't get back our tools, which were $1,200. Today, I accidentally sent an invoice to Karen and I got this response. I received the bill you sent this afternoon. I would appreciate an itemized invoice to review. I will look forward to receiving a new invoice along with itemized statements from my previous payments. It is standard practice for a contractor to bill with detailed invoices. I hope we can work together to resolve things as peacefully and efficiently as possible. She is asking for all the invoices for the past 3 years and to itemize it. We already break it down into more categories than material, labor, and contracting fees. It would take me over 10 hours to get all that. And I'm assuming she would want to nitpick it. I was at Home Depot earlier today making a quick run for some supplies for my current home renovation. I was picking up cement board and some various materials to trench power to a breakfast counter that will be installed in our kitchen. I had one of the big wallboard carts that I was cruising around with, being careful and cautious of others the whole time, so the trip was a bit frustrating, as there is a lot of stopping and waiting to allow crowds to pass so I can safely maneuver without bumping into anyone or anything. It's not a big deal, and it was to be expected, but I'm only mentioning this part to set the stage that by the end of my 30-minute endeavor that could have been much quicker had I not needed this cart, I may have been in a different mindset by the time I got to the checkout. So I have all my supplies and just need the cement board now, so I head on over to the wallboard aisle. Funny enough, it's totally chaotic. There's a middle-aged guy, his elderly father, and late 20-something son were loading sheetrock in a way that was taking the whole width of the aisle, so I had to go down another aisle to get around them. I'd usually just bring my cart up against the stack and pull off the amount I need. It's quite quick, with multiple hand. Additionally, they had pulled 2 sheets down and let them land on a flatbed cart, which doesn't work. It simply won't fit. They had left that out in the middle of the aisle to get the more appropriate cart, apparently. I carefully move the flatbed off to the side so it's out of the way of the aisle, and get to work with loading the cement board. I have a sheet in my hand, and the youngest of that crew decides he needs to get somewhere quick and awkwardly walks really close behind me, making it so I can't maneuver the sheet onto my cart. No biggie, I just hold it awkwardly till he passes, which was just another oddity that further set the stage for me. I finally finish and head over to the pro checkout. I get over there, and there's 2 guys being wrung out with a cart. The employee checking them out appears kind of newish. He's a younger guy that seemed to be struggling with one of their items or something, but I wasn't going to try to haul my cart full of 12 sheets of cement board over to a regular checkout, and it wasn't a big deal. So I wait patiently, and these guys finally go to swipe their card, and this is where things get spicy. The dream team from the wallboard aisle start walking up with a large cart of drywall they were struggling to work through in the aisle, along with some additional items. The middle-aged guy awkwardly walks in front of me and takes a hold of the cart that was with the guys at checkout, and it all clicks. That cart didn't belong to the 2 guys at checkout. The older guy brings his cart loaded with 12 sheets of sheetrock and passive-aggressively moves diagonally in front of me to cut me off. I like to think I'm a nice guy, but I was over it at this point. The middle-aged guy looks me in the eyes and I say, "Man, I like your style." I wasn't aware we can reserve spots in line at the pro checkout. I feel dumb having just stood here for 5 minutes. He shrugs and says, "I was just here, I had to get more things." I shook my head and let it go. The employee starts checking them out and goes through the first cart. He gets to the sheetrock and asks, "How many is that?" 6. And the old guy immediately says, "Yes, 6. Here's the thing with sheetrock. It's always bought in bulk 99% of the time, and it's transported in pairs to keep it from easily snapping in transit. If you need to buy one, you have to rip the tier strips off that bind them together, but they are rung up individually." I let the employee get through the rest of the items and hit the total button so they could see what it came out to, then immediately pounced. "Excuse me, sir." They pause and the cashier turns to me. "You're wringing out only 6 sheets of drywall, but there's actually 12 there." The old guy snaps at me. "They're sold in pairs." I look at him and respond, "No, sir. You're mistaken. I can show you on the app that they're definitely sold individually, and the cashier can get confirmation of it from his supervisor if needed." The middle-aged guy looks at me again, and I give him a big smile and say, "I'm sure it's an honest mistake, but I'm glad I was here to help fix it." The cashier adjusts his mistake, and the bill goes up about $80. I gave them a smile as they left. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. So, there I was minding my own business, biking to the store to grab something for dinner. It had been a long day at work, and I just wanted to get some food and relax. I was riding in the bike lane, listening to some music on my headphones, when suddenly, something hit my bike. 1 second, I'm pedaling along, and the next, I'm sprawled on the ground, my bike twisted and ruined beside me. I shook my head, trying to clear the daze from the sudden impact, and that's when I saw it. A red SUV parked right next to my destroyed bike. Before I could even process what had just happened, the driver of the SUV, let's call her Karen, because that's exactly what she turned out to be, stormed out of her car, her face twisted in a look of utter indignation. "Oh my God, my car," she screamed, her eyes wide with disbelief as she inspected her precious vehicle. I tried to get up, my body aching from the fall. "Ma'am, you hit my bike with your car." "I didn't hit your car." Karen whirled around to face me, her expression now one of pure outrage. You hit my car with your bike." "How dare you!" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Ma'am, you hit my bike." "I was in the bike lane and you hit me." She crossed her arms, clearly not willing to back down. "I didn't hit your bike, you hit my car. And you need to pay for the damages?" I tried to stay calm, but it was getting harder by the second. "Ma'am, Before I could finish, Karen slapped me. Yes, she actually slapped me. Right there on the side of the road in front of God and everybody. Firstly, I said, rubbing my cheek, "You hit me while I was in the bike lane. Not only were you driving in the wrong lane, but I'm also injured. I could press charges against you." Karen didn't even flinch. She just pulled out her phone and called the police. I stood there in shock and pain, waiting for the authorities to arrive. I couldn't believe this was happening. My bike was wrecked, my body was aching, and now I had to deal with this woman who was acting like she was the victim. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived. They took statements from both of us, and it was clear from the start that they were skeptical of Karen's version of events. She kept insisting that I had somehow swerved into her car, but the officers were clearly not buying it. One of the officers approached me. "So, what happened?" I explained everything. How I was biking in the lane, how she had swerved into me, how she had slapped me when I tried to reason with her. The officer nodded. "Would you like to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, I would. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a bad TV drama. But it turned out that Karen had done herself no favors. She had been boasting to the officers about how she had a dashcam that would prove her innocence. When they reviewed the footage, it clearly showed her swerving into the bike lane and hitting me. Her aggressive behavior after the accident didn't help her case either. We went to court, and it was almost laughably quick. The dashcam footage made it clear that Karen was entirely at fault. She had to pay me $30,000 in damages, which covered my medical bills and the cost of my bike with some extra for pain and suffering. Her husband, who was apparently fed up with her antics, divorced her. Their child had been in the car during the accident, and the court awarded him full custody, barring Karen from seeing her son due to her erratic behavior. As for me, I ended up with a broken ankle and a fractured knee. It was a rough couple of months recovering, but I eventually healed up. The money I received helped a lot, not just with the medical expenses, but also giving me a bit of a financial cushion. As long as I can remember, my mother has been incredibly immature. She has a variety of mental health issues, so I try to be understanding, but it's becoming exhausting. Me and my boyfriend currently live at home with her and are not in a position to move out for another year or so, but we are saving. Yesterday I worked 11, 3 p.m. and 6. Tammin didn't come home in between. I just met up with my boyfriend on his work break, grabbed lunch, and went back. When we both came home, she was a delight, did the grocery shopping I usually pay for, got me a new plant for my room, weirdly nice, but I appreciated it, and I went straight up to get ready for bed. She had entirely trashed my whole bedroom. We had had no argument prior to this. I do not know her motives, and it really stressed me out. She dumped all the shoes from my shoe rack on my bed that I had just changed the sheets on. She spilled my sourdough starter all over my favorite vintage wool rug. She got my rubbish out of the recycling and threw it all over the floor. A bunch of stuff from my shelves had just been strewn about onto the floor. So after work, I changed my sheets, binned my rug because I just cannot be bothered to deal with it, tidied up the rest of it, and put the rubbish back in the recycling and went for a shower. Now she is acting like nothing happened. I am not a messy person. I do a large majority of the cooking and cleaning at home. I'm very grateful she lets us live there, and I try to be understanding, but I physically can't deal with her behavior anymore. I don't understand it, and I don't know why she acts out like this. She has behaved poorly on many occasions, but this is possibly my final straw, and I am livid. There is no rhyme or reason to it, and I'm tired of dealing with this. Once, when I was younger, she asked me why I don't make much of an effort to get along with her boyfriend at the time. I was honest and just let her know he makes a lot of racist jokes, not just in private, and it is embarrassing when we are out as a group and he goes up to immigrants and verbally harasses them when they are just going about their business, calling them names or imitating their accents, especially. Since we are immigrants, he is British. He was also a heavy drinker and got very loud and confrontational, and it made me uncomfortable. We left it at that. About a week later, he was staying over, and I came downstairs to get my leftovers from the fridge and go upstairs to eat. As soon as I entered the kitchen, she said, "Well, why don't you tell him why you don't like him? Go on." I tried to get out of it and leave because I didn't want to argue, but they both kept pushing me. I just said sometimes the comments he makes towards people make me uncomfortable, and I don't really want to hear them, even if he intended them to be jokes because I felt they were offensive. They both blew up at me, shouting and screaming. He took both his kids and drove home over an hour very intoxicated because he didn't want to be disrespected by a child. My mom later that night blocked me on Instagram, WhatsApp, and my phone number because I came downstairs just looking to argue. And I'm too opinionated, and he's just joking. It's not like he's beating them. They all find it funny, too, and told me I'm also racist because I watched South Park and The Simpsons. I have never even watched an episode of The Simpsons, but I do enjoy South Park, so I'm just as bad as him. They later broke up because he made fun of her accent, "We are Polish," and insulted her weight as a funny joke. She's been like this ever since I was a child. I'm honestly just sick of it. I am sick of her behavior. If I bring it up to her, I am suddenly the immature one. I'm getting upset over nothing and I'm being too sensitive, or she'll just bombard me with insults, calling me lazy or stupid and try to get a reaction out of me. If I start crying because I mean that's my mother and she's blatantly insulting me, it hurts. She says I'm just seeking for attention, and she doesn't feel bad for me and tells me her mother was much worse and I'm lucky she doesn't beat me. I acknowledge she's been through a lot, but oh my God, I am exhausted. I cannot tolerate her any longer. The only other family member I have is my aunt, who is on my mom's side because she lies to her and makes me out to be the horrible one that I never clean up after myself. I failed in school, I'm disobedient, I'm lazy, etc. And she's the best mother in the world, but she's struggling to manage my behavior. I do majority of the cleaning, including cleaning up after her because I know she struggled. I got nearly straight A's. I dropped out of college to work by choice. I am an incredibly boring person. Disobedient is definitely a stretch considering the only places I go are the gym, work, and occasionally out on dates with my boyfriend. I wouldn't say I'm lazy either. It's just all exhausting because she makes herself out to be incredible and she's never, ever wrong. I'm just a horrible daughter, so nobody is ever on my side. I'm just sick of it. How do I tolerate one more year in this place? I'm genuinely depressed about coming home every day, and it's exhausting. I, female 48, have known Pat, female 48, for decades. As far as I can remember, she was fixated on having 5 children and a picket fence dream life. I slowly cut ties with her in college because she was an opportunist and I didn't trust her. She is both manipulative and forceful. Her idea of cute rubbed me the wrong way. Pat likes to walk like a penguin when she wants to elicit pity, and she usually does this when she wants to evoke the underdog narrative. I've never seen someone act so despicable and ridiculous at the same time. I moved on with my life, happily got rid of her for years. Pat eventually found me on Facebook. I accepted her friend request out of politeness. Pat has become the epitome of a permissive mother. Her 5 kids do as they please, and she never calls them out. She tried to force a relationship between me and her daughters and made them call me auntie. Pat tried to drop them at my house uninvited. Her phone calls were insistent. She tried to monopolize my time. She began to show up at my job. I created some boundaries, so she tried to find loopholes. It was a nightmare. My husband and I hosted a party for the community center, not the real name, new members. The community center is actually a very informal initiative, and my husband and I mainly serve the homeless population. We prefer to help strangers instead of catering to potentially narcissistic acquaintances. We don't mind lending a hand, but we have encountered truly dishonest, choosing beggars. There are other services, like one of the members who helps women get their wedding and prom dresses for free. The community center location headquarters is actually a farm owned by an elderly couple. There is a barn, a venue, and a very nice green field with an artificial lake and some fowl. They charge for the use of their facilities, weddings, etc., but not for community-oriented stuff. Pat had always been salty at her husband for demanding that she go back to work after baby 3. In the meantime, he worked 3 jobs. She demanded he get her pregnant to fulfill her dream of having 5 kids. He didn't agree because he was already nearly 45 and felt like he might never be able to retire. She got away with bringing new babies into this world anyway. Her fascination with being pregnant comes from all the attention she gets. She had at least 1 miscarriage in between each kid. Pat latched onto our group. She never missed any of our activities. I hated having her in my house, but it was an open invitation that included virtually everyone, and she was very active as an event organizer. I didn't like the way her kid behaved. We have a designated area for parties and entertainment, but her kids ended up inside my bedroom. We ended up having to keep watch of them and enjoyed 0 of our own party. I called her days later to get my point across regarding their overall behavior, but she completely cut me off and began talking about herself and said her kids wanted to come visit again and use our pool. I never answered that. I didn't want to say no, I will not have your brats over. She also called me as summer was approaching specifically to let me know her middle daughter was bored and wanted to spend a week at our home. I politely declined, citing that me and my husband have to work and cannot entertain guests. Pat paid no heed. Her kid called me on the weekend, calling me auntie, and attempted to coax me by saying, "Mom says you invited me to spend summer with you." I quickly clarified and offered an explanation to avoid hurting a kid's self-esteem. Never mind. Her daughter just hung up on me. Pat's Facebook also showed some red flags. Some cryptic rants here and there were visible, along with friends' comments and complaints on how she asked a particular person to watch her kids only for a couple of hours and ended up leaving them all day. Another of her friends criticized her girls' night out because Pat had just asked them to be patient and wait until she could pay back some money that she owed them, yet she had money to spend on Friday night outings. I thought those very public comments on private matters were more like a cry of lost patience. Unpleasant things began to happen, like the time she volunteered to wrap the Xmas presents for underprivileged kids. We all wanted to create a mix of less costly gifts with really nice ones. Surprisingly, some nice and eye-catching toys and games went missing but turned up under her Christmas tree, courtesy of her mother-in-law's Facebook post. No one could prove anything but it was hate-inducing. Or the time my daughter called me in tears to pick her up after she attended Pat's daughter's birthday, Casey. My daughter had been ignored all night because she didn't gift her the expensive gaming stuff Casey practically demanded. My daughter did ask, but I said no. We would buy her a very nice and thoughtful present according to her taste. So when I went to pick her up, my daughter was sitting alone in the living room while Casey and her friends stayed outside. Stories about Pat and her family multiplied. The owners at the farm community center decided to keep their gates locked unless they had guests or events because Pat got in the habit of driving in whenever she pleased, and it was either her kids screaming and disturbing ongoing weddings, throwing rocks at the koi in the lake, or her hassing the geese in the yard, or how she stiffed another soccer mom with a lunch bill and then pulled the struggling financially card, or how other parents hated her because she created unnecessary hostile competition. When my daughter turned 13, I allowed her wear my grandma's ring. It's not an expensive piece of jewelry, but it's vintage and girls nowadays want to look boho. My granny gave it to me when I became a teenager, so I passed it on to my kids so she could wear it on her birth week. It was weird that she became quiet and distracted after that. She also didn't want to go to school, and my husband and I became suspicious. She never opened up, and my other kids had no clue. We went to her school, but her teachers assured us nothing had changed in her environment. My husband and I suspected she was being bullied, but our kid gave us no tools to support her. My kid is very sunny and very compassionate. She has never had any problems with other kids. I called her best friend's moment. Natalie, my kid's Beth, told us what was going on. Casey, Pat's eldest, and my daughter had become close. I knew this and wasn't too thrilled. I found the age. Casey was 17. Gap not exactly inappropriate, but I'd rather see my daughter spend time with friends in the same age range. Casey is very beautiful and gifted student. She is also very conceited. To make this story short, she asked my daughter if she could try on the ring and refused to give it back. She later claimed that she lost it, but would look for it, so my daughter was distraught. My daughter kept asking for her ring, and as a result, Casey shunned her and spread the word that my kid was trying to steal her ring. Some kids at school took Casey's side. So now Casey just wore my kid's jewelry to school like nothing happened. If that doesn't qualify as taunting, I don't know what does. My guilt comes from not being able to get my daughter to open up and feel safe telling me the truth. I talked to her, and she burst into tears. I was both pained as a mother and furious that some teenage witch was doing this under our noses. I went straight to Pat's car after school. I asked to talk as Casey was about to go in. So I grabbed Casey's hand and asked to see her jewelry. Casey froze, and she tried to make a fist, so I became relentless. Casey yelled, "Mom," and Pat struggled to get out of the car. I slid the ring off. Casey has tiny hands and wore the ring on her index finger. First, Pat yelled at me. After I confronted her with the engraving on the band, my grandma's maiden name, she argued it was loaned to her daughter by my kid. Then she said she bought it. I paid no heed. I did warn them that I knew Casey had become an abusive friend to my daughter. Pat called me to tell me off. She said she was trying to raise an assertive young woman, and I had just messed that up by being overbearing. She never apologized for her thief of a child. Pat's husband, Hank, is what can be described as a doormat. Pat wore him down to a knob. He had no choice but to obey her to keep the peace. She was a bully who actively withdrew affection when he didn't follow her wishes, even in public. So she got kids 4 and I-5 after a relentless campaign that included leaving him for 2 months. Her pregnancies were a nuisance because she expected to be treated like the only lady who has even been pregnant. She strolled around in a wheelchair almost immediately after getting pregnant, and she would get very sick on weekends, so her kids were often sent to friends and family so that she could rest. Pat systematically bullied Hank. She would leave town and take the kids with her. Poor Hank would look distraught, drinking on his porch or just looking really lonely. This is how she got off the hook and was able to leave her job. Hank had virtually no voice, so he struggled to keep the marriage together. Everyone liked him, but hated her equally. Hank loved to talk to other people, but seemed concerned that Pat would be upset. Over time, according to my husband, Hank began to show signs of depression and mental distress. Our friend Lena runs the Wedding Prom Dress Initiative. It's not complicated. Dresses are sourced from donations, eBay, trunk shows, etc. Unusually beautiful dresses are retained so that more than one bride gets to wear them. In some cases, a bride will pay $50, but most of the time, the dresses are donated to the bride. Pat was involved in this. Lena kept her in because they never had any issues, and her task was limited to just shipping the dresses out. Pat decided to renew her vows, and her bridezilla, Karenzilla attitude became the icing on the cake. For starters, she bullied another couple into giving up their wedding date at the farm because she needed her renewal to match her exact wedding date. They were not impressed with her harassment, so they booked another venue. As a result, the farm owners were pissed because Pat was already costing them money after she had successfully negotiated a cut in their rate because she couldn't afford it, but will repay by doing maintenance work around the venue. She never made good on her work. Pat became attached to a particular dress that was already assigned to another bride. Lena made it clear that she would need to pay for her own dress. So Pat played it cool and shipped the wrong gown instead. She was adamant that it was the right dress, despite all the notes on Leah's agenda. The other bride was truly gracious about it. She was obviously disappointed, but never made a scene. What bothered me most is that I picked that dress and bought it for $40 at a garage sale, not my money, Leah's money. It was a vintage dress, ankle length, white, with lots of lace and a huge bargain. Again, when confronted, Pat did a Casey and used the "this is mine" strategy. We felt so bad for the other bride that we did our best to get her something nice to wear. The other bride was a true fighter. She had pulled out of welfare, earned her high school diploma, and was working to get on her feet by trying to earn a certificate as an acrylic nail technician. So, her reward was to have some Karen steal her dress. Pat never admitted to messing up, but just by the fact that she claimed it was her dress, we knew. Lena never allowed her in her warehouse again. Their last phone fight ended with Pat bringing up the other bride's past, like it mattered, and this conversation is over. It's my dress, and you are mistaken. That was weeks before the other bride's wedding. Pat went all out on her wedding decor. She spent way too much. She hired a caterer for some food, mainly mimosas and appetizers, but the wedding invitation included a request for specific dishes for her Sunday brunch wedding. Either she ran out of banquet money or was on a complete moocher mode. I picture the penguin walking upon practically asking everyone to supply her wedding reception grub, and I cringe. There is nothing wrong with potluck weddings. In fact, they can be a nice addition to a very cozy and family-oriented wedding reception. But don't you need to at least be close to your guests in order to ask for such a thing? Even I got an invitation. I told everyone I wasn't going because I was very uncomfortable being told what to bring and was probably expected to give them a cash gift on top of that. Some of the older ladies in our group agreed. Some said they would not decline in advance because she is a bully and they didn't want a confrontation. Lena called me the night before Pat's re-wedding. Lena was there to close the Saturday night bingo, and Pat was awfully friendly, but that's what she does whenever things are going her way. Lena peeked into the garment bag and saw the exact same dress while Pat was caught up supervising the wedding decoration. The thing with Karens is that they expect everyone to suck it up or make their dreams come true, or they simply underestimate everyone and think we are all fools. Lena is a very straightforward person with a so-sue-me attitude. She told me she would just ruin the dress. After all, it was hers, so she could do whatever she wanted. If Pat wanted to take legal action, and should things get ugly, she needed to prove ownership. However, the dress was the same. The marks inside the hem and the tags were the same. Even the tag numbers that were punched to identify each dress for logistics purposes matched. Pat had the dress altered with some extra beading dyed to a deep cream color. But it was obviously the same garment. Lena and I snuck in before the venue was closed for the night. All brides are allowed to stay in a small bedroom for a small charge so that they don't need to drive in on their wedding day. Honestly, the makeshift chapel was gorgeous. I don't know how she paid for it, but it was full of flowers and presumptuous details. I naively brought in some ink to spill on the dress, but Lena said she wanted something more awful, like a nasty surprise. Ink would be too obvious, and if she saw it ahead, she may be able to snag another gown from somewhere. No, the ideal thing was to have her trust the dress was fine. So Lena locked herself in a bathroom stall and completely cut out the back panel. She patiently put it back on its hanger and zipped the bag. We left through the emergency door with the back of the dress stuffed inside Lena's purse. I completely hate people who target and steal from anyone they, Pat and her kid, calculate to be in a weaker position. The wedding was scheduled at 9 a.m. Pat called me at 7 a.m., but I ignored her call. I picked up by 8 a.m., both curious and wondering if she suspected anything. Pat was frantic. She was crying that her dress was missing by half. I purposely made her explain, being annoyingly dense and continually interrupting like she does, and stalling the conversation. She asked me if I could lend her my wedding dress. I said no, sorry. She then asked me if I would help her get a dress. I was satisfied to remind her that the town's bridal shops were closed on Sunday and the others that would open were almost an hour away. The farm is already almost 1 hour away from our town. If Pat could get a shop to rent a dress, she would need to try the dress on and get it steamed. Even if the dress was ready to wear, it would easily take more than 2 hours, round trip. She tried to ask me to go pick a dress. It would pay for this? Even if a shop were open and brought her a dress, it would add to the cost. Also, these shops open at 10 or 9:30 at earliest. By the time they got to her, it would be time to wrap up the wedding because she needed to clear the venue by 12:00 for the next event. She broke down and mumbled some stupid stuff I didn't understand. So Pat hung up on me and called Lena instead. She asked Lena to bring her anything she had available. Lena and I ended up delivering the most outdated, moss-smelling, oversized dress. Pat's disappointment was a mix between angry and emotional. She also tried to wear her knee-length silk bridal slip as a wedding dress, but it was too obvious and it really looked cheap. She tried to get her daughter to give her her own dress to wear with an open-back zipper, due to fitting issues. But Casey refused, asking if she was supposed to attend the wedding naked. She got a point, plus Casey is petite. The dress needed a petticoat to plump up the skirt, which wasn't available. So it dragged all over the floor and Pat had to keep pulling it up. Pat walked down the aisle with one hand on her bouquet and another one grabbing her dress. The dress looked limp and weird with the arrangements of pins. They didn't show. That caused the sleeves and neckline to pucker into messy rims. She spent the ceremony looking uncomfortable and out of place. Very few people attended, but that was not part of any revenge. That was just how people reacted to her entitled attitude. The dress looked awful. The reception portion of the wedding had all this princely decoration, a very nice cake and a bridezilla with a dress from hell. I didn't stay, but I was told she was so disappointed she spent her wedding sulking. There was no dance, no actual speech. She had to change into a shirt and leggings because the dress was too uncomfortable. Everyone talked about how Pat put on her flip-flops and walked around aimlessly until she ordered the ushers to start folding up the chairs within 1 hour of the reception. So she practically kicked everyone out and a cake was never cut. Pat wasn't the same after this. She was not as loud and avoided everyone. I think she was disappointed that nobody ran to her rescue, not even her family who came from out of town. Her husband finally cracked under all the pressure and sought some help. He was slaving away and coming home to clean the house while Pat used her kids as an excuse to spend like crazy. Hank also had to do kid homework because Pat never had time or never had patience. She also refused to get a part-time job so her kids could attend an after-school and get help with their school stuff. Therapy seemed to help Hank because the last time Pat left with her kids, he didn't seem distraught. He would be riding his bicycle and could be seen more relaxed while mowing his lawn. Hank told my husband that he had contemplated suicide after their third kid. When Pat returned, he maintained the routine but was interested in going out by himself and doing things for himself. We began to see Pat alone all the time. Hank was seen less and less in the same car and eventually moved in with his parents. He filed for divorce on the grounds of emotional cruelty, and I don't think he won. Instead, I'm not sure of this because this is what I was told. There was some sort of a settlement or agreement that she would not get close or interact with him unless it has to do with the kids. I also don't know if Pat even actually suspected what happened to her dress. She slowly pulled away from the community center and became less active in social gatherings. Pat also removed me from her Facebook as well as mostly everyone else from school and the center. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.